One of the best DPS characters in the game and the current Electro DPS king Calcharo might just be relinquishing his title very soon. As great as Calcharo is, there are a couple issues in his kit that really impact his overall performance. And on top of that, it has been rumored that Xiangli Yao, which is an Electro 5-star DPS character dropping right after Changli's banner, will be free for every player through an in-game event. However, whether or not Xiangli Yao will be free, if he is able to capitalize on the issues Calcharo has and provides a much better gameplay experience, he might just end up taking the crown as the Electro DPS king from Calcharo only 2 versions into the game. So I just want to go over Calcharo's strengths and weaknesses, what Xiangli Yao would need to do in order to become the next best Electro main DPS character, and ultimately, how much of an impact would it really make on Calcharo if he is outclassed. Just before we jump into it, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel for more WutheringWaves content and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Now, Calcharo since launch has undeniably been the best Electro main DPS, due to his explosive damage output and also since there isn't really much competition, so by default he's already at the top. However, he does have some traits which makes him deserving of being the best Electro main DPS. His explosive damage output, as I just mentioned, would definitely be one of them, as it would allow him to brute force through majority of content within the game. So the fact that many players were able to pick up Calcharo as a guaranteed 5-star very early on, allowed them to fly through a lot of content, and for some players provided the ability to comfortably skip Jiyan. Of course, Jiyan was the better main DPS, but Calcharo was powerful enough to carry your account, so you could save for Yinlin and future characters. Now, along with having the explosive damage output, Calcharo without a doubt has one of the best character designs with insane animations. Anyone that looks like Sephiroth is already gonna have a high rating, but then his abilities enable him to be one of the flashiest characters on the battlefield, especially during his Resonant Celebration as he enters his second state where he goes on a rampage. Also, he is the only character in the game to have an animation for his intro skill, just as if his animations weren't great enough. Now, the last strength I want to outline would be Calcharo's flexibility in team building. Naturally, Yinlin would be Calcharo's best partner since she provides an increase of 20% electro damage and 25% resonant celebration damage through her outro skill. Also, Yinlin is capable of dealing coordinated electro attacks and doesn't require that much field time, which is perfect for Calcharo. Now, since the majority of Calcharo's insane damage scales off resonant celebration damage, Jianxin would also be a great partner for Calcharo since she provides a massive 38% resonant celebration damage boost through her outro skill. Changli also is likely to synergize with Calcharo since her outro skill is the fusion version of Yinlin's, meaning Calcharo would benefit from the 25% resonant celebration damage. So there is the option of running both Calcharo and Changli in a dual DPS team. Now, of course, Calcharo's performance would be at its peak when he's with Yinlin, but it's great that he has options if Yinlin is occupied on another team or if you just don't have her. Now as for Calcharo's weaknesses, and the first one is linked to his Forte gauge. How you fill Calcharo's Forte gauge is by using his resonance skill 3 times, which he is able to activate in a row. However, the attacks need to connect with the enemy in order for the gauge to be filled, meaning if you miss one of those resonant skill attacks, you'll be forced into waiting 8 seconds in order for the resonant skill to recharge to then be able to fill the gauge. Of course, with good awareness and timing, you may not run into this issue that often, but it does happen, especially since a lot of enemies tend to teleport or fly away from you. So it really does hinder Calcharo's performance, and even more so when you are going up against the clock in Tower of Adversity. If there was just one more way to allow Calcharo to fill his Forte gauge, like dodge counters, or if the resonant skill didn't need to connect with an enemy, it would really just solve the issue, and there are characters capable of filling their Forte gauge without having to hit enemies. So it wouldn't be unreasonable, and it just seems a bit unfair on Calcharo needing to connect his resonant skills. Now, the second issue where Calcharo takes a serious hit in DPS would be his Resonant Celebration. Calcharo's Resonant Celebration consists of him dealing a small electro nuke to enemies and then enters his second state for roughly 10 seconds. During those 10 seconds, you would spam Calcharo's basic attacks to fill his Forte gauge, and once it's been filled, he unleashes his massive damage dealing blow Death Messenger. However, Calcharo can be interrupted during his basic attacks, which ultimately resets the basic attack sequence, and you would need to complete the 5-hit sequence in order to activate the Death Messenger attack. You are just about able to squeeze 2 Death Messenger attacks during his Resonant Celebration, so if you are interrupted, that would be a whole chunk of damage that goes to waste. Again, it may not happen all the time, but it does happen, and it could just be a small projectile thrown at you which interrupts the entire basic attack sequence. So it can be painfully annoying when you are able to finally use Calcharo's liberation to then not be able to reach its max damage potential, since you likely will be interrupted. The only situation in a boss fight where you can comfortably use the liberation would be whilst the enemy is staggered, which doesn't happen too often, so there's even more pressure on your timing being perfect to ensure you can get the most out of the liberation. Now this wouldn't be the case if the devs decided not to provide Calcharo with such a waste of an inherent skill being damage reduction, and instead, Calcharo should have gained increased resistance to interruption, just like how Jianxin has when she uses a fully charged heavy attack. So if a support character in the future can provide increased resistance to interruption for the team, and a few attack buffs would be nice, it would be a game changer for Calcharo. Now there are some other issues players may find with Calcharo, such as quick swapping will lead to Calcharo losing out on buffs from outro skills, and some of his attacks animation locking you in or just going to waste when you dodge. I do believe these issues aren't as significant as the ones I mentioned before, but they are still prevalent and would just make Calcharo's kit even more clunky. So now with all things regarding Calcharo considered, the question is, how much of a chance does Xiangli Yao have in taking the throne? Well, it really just depends on Xiangli Yao's damage dealing capability and most importantly, how well designed his kit is. Since Xiangli Yao is an Electro main DPS releasing 2 versions into the game and after Calcharo's technical release, it would be pretty safe to assume he will be able to deal around the same amount of DPS or even more than Calcharo. Initially, I believe Xiangli Yao wouldn't out DPS Calcharo if he is a free character, but some PGR players decided to educate me in the comments and mentioned that KuroGames released a few exclusive characters for free in PGR that power crept the characters released prior. So if KuroGames decide to follow the same route in WutheringWaves, Xiangli Yao might just out DPS Calcharo. However, damage output in my opinion isn't enough alone, since Calcharo's DPS is already high enough to clear majority of content in the game. So if Xiangli Yao out DPS's Calcharo, it would be nice, but ultimately doesn't really matter. What really matters is if Xiangli Yao can provide smooth gameplay with no major setbacks or problems whilst dealing a good amount of DPS. The setbacks in Calcharo's kit are just massive turnoffs to play with him. So considering the level of quality KuroGames has invested into their exclusive characters, I would say that Xiangli Yao certainly has potential to provide that smooth gameplay along with a well-designed kit. So it really does look like Xiangli Yao will take the best Electro main DPS position, since it's expected for his DPS to be at a level to clear majority of content at least and for his kit to not be clunky. Now lastly, would it really impact Calcharo if Xiangli Yao outclasses him? Short answer is that it really does nothing. As I have reiterated numerous times, Calcharo does have the juice to clear majority of content, and I know for a fact some players will bear the issues he brings with him just because of his animations and character design, which is completely understandable. Of course his clunkiness can be a pain in endgame content and it could make it more difficult. So if you desire a more comfortable experience with less hassle, Xiangli Yao might be the one to provide that to you, and if he is free then even better. However, Calcharo will still be a powerful Electro DPS with amazing damage dealing capabilities, insane animations, and some of the most pleasing to watch gameplay when you successfully pull it off. Overall, both Calcharo and Xiangli Yao will ultimately be great Electro DPS characters, but I do believe Xiangli Yao potentially will provide the most DPS and comfortability to players, which would make him the next best Electro main DPS. Calcharo will still be a strong Electro DPS character, and I know many players would still be willing to use him. In terms of character design and animations, Calcharo will remain up there, and I do hope at some point later on KuroGames will consider buffing Calcharo in some way, whether it's through a support character that helps Calcharo with his major issue of being interrupted during his liberation, or if they just rework his kit, as then it would definitely make him a much more enjoyable character to play with. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel for more WutheringWaves content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, I am curious to know from the Calcharo mains, are you still going to use him, or will you swap him out for Xiangli Yao if he is able to provide a smoother experience? So do comment down below. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.